Thank you very much. What we're going to do is we're going to start by, I'll introduce all the panelists and also start off with a question for each of the panelists as well. So I'll start with Travis Cox and let you introduce yourself. And I guess your first question will be is, how does cloud play in smart manufacturing and what are the benefits? So if you could introduce yourself, Travis.
All right, sure. Hey, everybody. So I'm Travis Cox. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist for Inductive Automation. We're a software provider. The Ignition platform is the software that we put on the market, and it's HMI, SCADA, MES, any industrial application platform. And in terms of the cloud plays a pretty big role. I mean, when you look at the amount of data that we're talking about here today that are out there, we got to have that data stored long-term in a scalable way, and the cloud can make that approachable. There's lots of different storage formats that are there, especially time series and data lakes and things that make it really possible to then get into the ML and the AI where we can actually turn that data into insights. So from there, it's also the applications that can be provided, to folks so they can leverage it, as you saw like with the Sealed Air example, to get that data to more people.
Okay, thanks a lot. Next, I'm going to go to Bob Rice. You probably want to pass the mic. Let you introduce yourself. We'll ask you start off with what specific challenges do manufacturers typically face when deploying analytics on an enterprise scale? So if you could, Bob.
So my name is Bob Rice, and I'm Vice President of Engineering of Control-Station. We have the Plant ESP product suite that Chris had talked about a little bit earlier. And, challenges of deploying enterprise analytics, I mean, there's a lot of them as we've sat through these few days. The two ones that I always find to be most important are ownership and accountability, right? These tools are phenomenal. All of these tools that you're going to be hearing and seeing, they're phenomenal to go out and deploy and use, but you got to have somebody who owns the process and is accountable for use of the tool, right? Just owning these tools do very little to actually improve your process. Owning them and using them and having people accountable for what comes out of them is really the biggest challenge, because that tends to be the kind of the cultural change that you have to make within your organizations, right? You have a lot of old school ways of doing things, and smart manufacturing, analytics, and business processes, they need to be updated, and sometimes changing those can be a big challenge. And so having the proper corporate as well as local ownership, as well as the accountability at the individual sites to use the tools to communicate with them will really ensure that they are successful. But those are probably the two biggest challenges that I see.
Okay, excellent, thanks. Next, going to have Don Rarwig, and your first question is going to is when it comes to updating a factory with new smart manufacturing technology, there are many moving parts, and where's the best place to start? So if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, Don Rarwig from Rain Engineering, and we are an education, consulting, support, and integration services company, and worked with many of the technologies that are being talked about, worked with customers that are Fortune 500 and mom and pop shops to make change in their organization. And with all the moving parts and understanding where to start their digital transformation journey, there's a couple of things that we've seen over the last several years as people have done different implementations. We see people selecting a technology before they're even sure what their use case is, and pursuing a system that ends up being the people end up working for the system rather than the system working for them. Lots of data input to a system and no data coming out of the system to help them do their jobs. So lots of moving parts. How do you know where to start? I think the key to understanding where to start is to really understand where you are. So as the business sets their goals and you decide where you're going to try to recapture some cost savings, you want to set your goals, communicate them clearly. I think my friend from Chevron displayed this best in his slide presentation, where every slide was exactly the same. He was able to communicate to everyone involved exactly what the impact was, why are we doing this, and what good can come from it, for what's in it for you. Right. And those are key best practices. And no matter where you decide to start, it's making sure you have your communication strategy worked out, your business goals are well communicated, and you understand where you are starting from. Then you can dream big for where you want to go.
Okay, great. Thanks. And Rufus Brown, we'll start with your first question. Is going to be what are some of the general challenges that you see in smart manufacturing?
Sure. Rufus Brown. I work with a company called RL Matus Associates. We're a sales agent for Redline Controls, and I do a whole lot of work in connectivity and IoT applications. And coincidentally, I've actually worked with Wayne before and Don on different projects. Some good, some not so good, actually. That's the funny part is you have to expect the not so good. And so what are the challenges? The first thing we run into is the last couple of days where we talked about all the connectivity and data and all these things. What happens whenever you walk to your customer and look at the back of their controller and they don't even have an Ethernet port? What do we do? So there's a lot of serial devices. There's things that aren't even on the network. There's a lot of plants that don't even have Ethernet cable run in them. So the big challenge is don't underestimate the infrastructure. It's almost a project in itself to get everything connected and then do something with the data. So that's one of the biggest challenges we fall to. The other thing that's been mentioned no less than 10 times in other presentations is you have to work together. IT can't say, no, you can't hang that on my network, or OT can't say, we're just going to build our own network. We've seen it both ways, but where we find when people come together as a team, you start to see success stories, which I think some of these are fantastic ones that you actually see a measurable result. But don't expect you just walk in, we leave this conference and we're going to make our factory smart. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's for sure. Obviously, if anybody in the audience has any questions, just raise your hand, and one of my colleagues at ARC will grab the mic. But if you don't have any questions, we certainly have plenty to keep us going until you do. First question I have is actually for Todd, and it's how have you what have you done to convey a lot of these success stories so you can kind of get the people within the plant to adopt these new technology solutions?
So what's critical is understanding the process. So that's where if you're a young engineer, get out in the field and learn what the operators actually do. So because if you don't know what they do, then you have to go out there and sit with them. And the thing is even if you do know what they do, still go sit with them, because it's about developing that relationship. And just ask them, hey, what are some of the things you do that you don't think are value added? Or ask their boss, the operations supervisor, what are some things you guys do that are time-based? Manual SCADA is where I like to hit first. We call them our operator routine duties. What is something that they go and write down a measurement and come back to the office and type it into a database? Those are slam dunks for finding what goes on or how they do their job. And then it's funny that you give someone, say, hey, if you put a pressure on this casing and I can automatically generate that report for you and send it to the Texas Railroad Commission. They're like, wait a minute, that's a pressure. What if I put a pressure there? Would that work? Yes, that would work. That's something I never thought of. You put the tool and they get just one light bulb in their head, then they are the ones that generate the ideas. But they have to feel like they trust you. You can't say, I'm here from Chevron Technology Center. I'm here to help. No, I don't even tell them where I'm from. I just say, hey, I used to be an automation engineer in your business unit.
That's like what the government says. I'm here.
Right, exactly.
I have a question for Wayne Workman. What are one of the key elements that really help make the project a success from your perspective?
Okay, is this working?
I don't know.
Number two.
Yeah. Switch. Good.
Right now.
Try it now.
Okay, can you hear me? All right. So one of the key elements that I found as going through almost any project is to start to define your standards early, especially working with different groups as you're going through. You're typically not totally isolated, so it's usually more than one group involved, IT, OT side, whatever it may be. It is to start to define things early on, define things as simple as we're going to use this naming convention. We're going to use this data structure. We're going to use this standard IP address scheme. We want to use a standard type of network architecture. And then that allows everybody to kind of focus on the same goal, which is the success of the project. If you don't set those standards early on, everybody has their own perception of how it should be done, the best way it should do it. And it's kind of like herding cats, So once you define the standards of the direction you want to go, then you can start looking at the components that will meet those standards, and then everybody has understanding of what's required of them. That they know that, okay, your data is gonna be coming this way, it's gonna be in this format, it's gonna be in this naming convention, it's coming up MQTT, and then they'll know how to take it and manipulate it from there. So that's what I found.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you for the presentations. I think it was very inspiring on how you succeeded. My question is, like, a lot of IoT projects starts off with a POC, proof of concept, but it doesn't see the light of the day, right? For a variety of reasons. What recommendations would you have to be able to get out of the POC phase and actually put it into actual implementation based on your success stories? What advice would you have for others that are starting on this journey?
I'll start with that. Once you're right, like oil and gas is the pilot king, not so much the scaling king. What has worked for me, and it's funny that we're at a ARC forum. The Digital Transformation Council had a meeting once in Houston, a regional meeting, and Mike Carroll came there, and he talked about peer pressure. So take a pilot that's worked for someone and they've scaled in their like little area and say, hey, you need to get a meeting with your peers and tell them what you did. And they see, oh, wait a minute, Kendall's doing that? I need to do that too. And that drives a lot of people want it when they see their friend is doing it, and hey, especially when it comes to performance reviews, hey, I need to do what he's doing. So that's where I've found, but again, it starts with a relationship. Got to develop a relationship and get that guy to do that, and that's really where it takes off. The thing is too is pilots, at least on Chevron, we don't always create master service agreements with that company. If something works, another hindrance has been we don't have an MSA with that company. Let's get that going now that we see that the pilot works. Then the other people are like, oh, I can do business as usual? All right, let's go.
Anybody else, or?
I think it's interesting to say that a lot of PLC pilots never get carried on. I think about developing the use cases and getting buy-in culturally first. So even before you perform those first pilots, everyone understanding all the things that were on your slides, right? Why are we doing this? What are we going to get out of it? What's in it for me as an operator or as a supervisor? So I think the development and acceptance of the use case culturally before implementing a pilot is the key to one of the factors.
Anybody else, or?
And I think start small. Make something work.
Yeah.
We don't have to do the entire plant, the entire company. Make something work. Everyone gets excited. They see the data. They see what you can do with it. I have a case, a customer in the Southeast as a tier supplier. They put in a big system. It worked. And they did it for maintenance. What they didn't find out is they did 24 Kaizen projects afterwards with what happened with the data. So they sold it as a maintenance project. It ended up being a complete revolution to the production. And so sometimes you have to sell it internally for it to work.
You know what another good thing is? Just threaten to take it out.
Right.
You need to wind it out. If they say, yeah, it's okay, fight your shit. Otherwise, they start screaming and say, we want to keep it, right?
That's a
And
good,
then ask go.
Yeah, good point. Right. I have a question for Shash. Please describe global manufacturing's use of digitalization to enable sustainability.
Yeah, I think a lot of the guys spoke about it. We start small, start with the, well, not Me Too syndrome, but encourage peer pressure. So peer pressure, KPIs, getting systems implemented. For example, you could use APM. There's a lot of chat about APM. How do you get APM to work? Should you measure utilization by the number of times a guy, analyst, reliability engineer enters the system, and or a scheduling engineer enters the scheduling system? No. You should check how many times he uses it to develop a recommendation for failure elimination, or how many times the scheduler actually uses the scheduling system to challenge corporate about a blend recipe which he was communicated. So I think success stories start with one educated user at a time, either from operations, maintenance, engineering. Choose that guy. He'll be the ambassador for the good news. And once the good news rubs off, the Me Too syndrome will definitely happen. And people will be after the value that they got from the cost they save from maintenance for bad actor filling elimination, or for the good profit that they would have made from a blend recipe, which they challenged the corporate about. So it's all about getting it in and working on people, make the best use case visible to everyone. That's what we've tried to do.
Excellent. And a question for the ex-governor of New Jersey, Chris. What's the timeline for development at the site for both established or new control loop best practices?
So we've had, the shortest we've had is about 3 months for established best practices. They already exist. We just have to modify them a little bit for whichever site we're going to. If they have the relevant instruments or system in place, yeah, 3 months is good enough. I've actually been working on one for 2 years. And so part of that is it's a new best practice, but also it's dealing with procurement, purchasing stuff from the US for India. And during COVID, that has been quite a nightmare. So, there's one thing of the standard processes we have, but we can't get around supply chain issues when those exist. So if all goes well, 3 months. Otherwise, it can take up to 2 years.
Yeah, nice tight span. I got one for Travis. How do organizations need to approach smart manufacturing from your perspective?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it's been said here. I mean, it's definitely driving a use case, a specific use case. I mentioned it. I mean, you gotta have something that you can actually measure and try to work towards, solving. And it could be something really small. It doesn't have to be a massive project. You get a lot of these messages about digital transformation. And it's about going to, leveraging AI and going this far. And some people don't even have the data yet. They're still writing things on clipboards, right? So it's finding that use case that's going to help the operators and working with them. Ultimately, I think it's best to just go interview the folks that are using it, like Todd was saying, and see what their challenges are. You learn a lot by just walking around the plant, and I've always enjoyed that. Coming from the software world, but going down, and just talking to them and seeing what their challenges are, and oftentimes it's pretty light bulbs go off. It's like, oh, we can solve that. So it's really a culture change. It's kind of people change than anything. The technologies all exist. I mean, we can do all sorts of cool things today. It's about what makes the most sense, how are you going to start it, and how are you going to then measure that success.
Okay, great. Hey, Bob, how does CLPM, which you probably may want to define to the audience, as well as PID performance fit into broader enterprise analytics discussion?
So CLPM is control loop performance monitoring.
Okay.
So, your control loops are what run your process plant, right? And you spend a lot of time doing asset optimization, process optimization, that dreaded loop tuning stuff that I'm sure Chris and everyone else here has done, right? It takes a lot of time, and the measure of a successful project for most of these is it's still running a month later or 2 months later. And when I think and work on analytics projects, it's all about tracking and maintaining and monitoring. And those control loops are kind of the heart and soul of a lot of the plants, and trying to keep them maintaining become part of the analytics that tell you how well your business operations are running, and they can become comparative from site to site. As Chris mentioned, they've got lots of different sites that all have the same piece of equipment, so they can monitor site to site to site and the performance of those assets and identify underperforming pieces of equipment or crushers and stuff, so they can say that this one is not best in fleet anymore. And so, you think about OEE, you think about, production and quality, but, controller performance or equipment performance kind of aligns right in with those analytics that you have everywhere else. And they are very specific. They're not, super generic things, but they really are good for being able to identify, health and performance and behavior of those assets that you're spending a lot of time and resources to optimize and so forth. So it aligns well with those KPIs that are critical for your efficiency improvements.
Okay. How about Dawn? What are some of the common pitfalls to avoid with digital transformation?
Most of it's been discussed, but I'll say this. Several of the panelists have mentioned engaging operators and people on the shop floor. One huge mistake that we see a lot is we seek the counsel of those on the shop floor and then do nothing with that information. When you do that, about the sixth time, the process engineer comes out and asks the operator, hey, what would you do? What would you change? And nothing happens, you don't get good input from them anymore. And then your only alternative is to have someone new come and ask the question. So that's one pitfall. If you're going to start something, finish it, right? Or at least bring it to a place where you can justify to someone why you didn't finish the other common pitfalls we mentioned. It's not beginning with the end in mind. Make a plan, understand what the goal is, touch on all the points on the slide. I'm going to use your slides forever. So, but that's a common pitfall too. I think more often than not, I see end users go to technology companies and ask for a demo. And probably a lot of you don't realize how horrible that is for the technology vendors, because they have to guess at what you want to see. And so they create a demo, and maybe somebody latches on to an idea that was pitched in the demo, and they force fit it to what you're trying to do, instead of starting with a use case, going to a technology supplier saying, show me how your technology can accomplish this use case. And just, like I said, starting with the end, beginning with the end in mind.
Okay, great. Yeah, question for you, Wayne. How were you able to move so quickly from the development phase to commercialization?
Well, one of the biggest key factors in moving quickly was not trying to reinvent the wheel. And what I mean by that is that, we worked hard to try to find existing technology, things that were commercially available, but then also tap into that knowledge base. So for example, with the Redline Flex Edge Gateway, it was a readily available device, but they already had the knowledge base of what we were trying to do. So working with people like Rufus, it just accelerated the whole program, and was able to go from a quick development of getting a couple data points talking, sent out to the cloud, to be able to commercialize it and deploy it. We have over 150 machines, 50 plants connected, 3 different countries already. So for me, if there's something out there and technology's there, use it, tap into existing knowledge bases, tap into existing resources. There's probably not too much that you can think of that hasn't been done, or that somebody can help you with. And what I found is working with a lot of engineers is that they get too proud and don't want to reach out for help, and they want to do it themselves and try to tackle everything. And once you realize that you can't do that, it makes things go quicker.
I have a quick follow-on to that, Wayne. You mentioned PAC-ML as a standard. I wonder if the cryovacs and the existing sealed air equipment were designed and developed with that tag structure in mind.
They were not.
Okay.
And that was part of the problem, was that every piece of equipment had different naming conventions, different tag structures, different data types. And using the Flex Edge, I was able to convert everything to a standard template with standard naming convention, and rename every data point coming over into the exact same naming conventions, the same structure, the same program, and send it up with the same method.
Right.
So
Okay.
I was able to streamline, and then that's another thing that helped me streamline it, was being able to create templates to be able to reuse code, to be able to reuse that. Don't write code for every single deployment. Create a master template that you can reuse and deploy quickly. So now we can, I can sit down and write a program to connect 10 machines in about 10 minutes, because we had the base program done and all the standards were predefined, all the naming conventions, the structures, everything was already defined ahead of time.
Well, that's great. I got just 2 more quick questions. I'm going to have one for Shash, which is about how many sites have imams deployed, and what's next?
Okay, so we have the 4 refineries and 2 gas plants within the wholly owned, that's global manufacturing. But the corporate team working with, Aramco has new plant digital. So it's also being done with the affiliates. So, a lot more upstream facilities are having IMOM, but it's like the basics, the foundational element, which is IMOM, to actually digitize your business process and make it digital. So you could do analysis of the data behind there. You could do analytics. So we see it as foundational, but all the quick wins now we're looking at data science related. So also looking at the value from there. but yeah, it's part of the commercialization that we're working on.
Okay. And last question for Chris. What were the major bottlenecks in your program's development?
Oh, the major bottleneck, I think we've talked a little
Yep.
about it. It's really alignment across the different functions, or having that beginning with the end in mind, as I think Rufus had mentioned. So one of the successes of the process that we deployed was that it was created by or initiated rather by the production excellence team, and we brought on the process control and or automation people early on in the process, as well as the plant operations team early on in the process. And that we were able to have good buy-in from everyone as a result of that. I think if we didn't have that, if everybody wasn't aligned, we'd have serious problems.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks very much for coming. Please give a good round of applause to our speakers and panelists. They did a great job. And we'll look forward to seeing you at 4 o'clock at whatever session you decide to choose. Have a great one. Thank you.